Up to me to introduce the man who stands between you and your lunch today. He's referred to as the chief bottle washer over at NetApp. Please welcome Matthew Hurford.
Thank you very much. And I am very aware that storage is not the most interesting topic for anybody, including people at NetApp. So I'm going to try and make this as interesting as possible. It being Australia Day, the first OpenStack Australia Day, I got the corporate slides and had a look at them and decided to Australia-fy them a little bit, so you might see that some of the titles have changed. I'm probably going to be in big trouble from marketing for doing that. And I want to start off with a story, because my first job in IT was driving the backup tape van. You don't start much lower than that. It took me 2.5 years to get qualified to run the microfiche machine, and from there printing was a small step away. And that's where I started my IT career, 15, 16 years in operations, ended up being an enterprise architect at the end of that journey. So I spent a long time in operations side of the business. And in recent times with NetApp in the last 7 years where I've worked at NetApp, I've spent more and more time worrying about what developers do and how we can help them. But in the time that I spent as an infrastructure guy, three things probably stick in my mind. It was always trying to simplify things, always trying to standardize things, and always trying to make things as resilient and as robust as I possibly could. And when I look at those three things that I learned in that 15, 16 years, and then I looked at what the premise of OpenStack was, I thought there were some amazing synergies. And that's why I got interested in OpenStack. It made sense to me from my infrastructure days, let alone it being around rapid development. In recent time, the last 7 years at NetApp, in the last 2 years in particular, I spent a lot more time talking to developers about how we can make their lives easier. Listening to C-level people inside organizations talk to me about wanting more business agility, want to be faster, want to innovate quicker, want better quality, want to make their customers happier. And that, for me, is the big driver for why OpenStack is gaining momentum and for why there are so many people here today. I'm going to touch on some of these points of how NetApp can make this better. Because my original thought was, well, hang on a second, we're a 25-year-old storage vendor. What on earth do we have to play in an open source community? And I think there's some good things to play, because it turns out that all the things we've done, all the things we've focused on are still important under OpenStack. You still want resilience. You still want to reduce costs, reduce risk. The same chestnuts that we've always relied on in our enterprise customers are still as pertinent as they were under OpenStack. And we're going to run through that a little bit. So we've been doing this for ages. We joined the OpenStack community about 6 months after it formed. We've had a major hand in the Cinder block driver build out, and then probably it's fair to say drove the Manila file services, data services underneath OpenStack. So an awful lot of leadership there. We've got folks on the board. And we do believe in taking that goodness from NetApp and putting it upstream into the OpenStack code releases. We want all that goodness that people have explored with NetApp natively to be able to actually access their services, whether it be data efficiencies, multi-protocol, all that goodness underneath the OpenStack services, which is why we focus so hard on putting those technologies and benefits upstream. And then this happened about 3 months ago. So, NetApp acquired a company called Solidfire. Now, Solidfire was founded by a guy called Dave Wright. Dave Wright founded a company called Jungle Disk. Now, Jungle Disk were bought by Rackspace, and Dave worked there for a long time, and then he wrote the operating system for Solidfire, and he didn't write it from a storage perspective. He was actually fairly frustrated with how storage guys viewed the world, and when they actually brought the developers together to write the Solidfire code base, one requirement was that nobody had any storage experience whatsoever. So Solidfire is written very much from a web-scale cloud architect perspective. That's what Dave was. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the important thing here is that it's got all the native integration to OpenStack, into the block drivers, but you manage it very differently. You manage it simply from a guaranteed quality of service. So NetApp and Solidfire have come together, and what does that mean? Well, it means that we now have a larger market share in terms of primary storage vendors providing storage capacity into the OpenStack community. These stats are taken from a survey in October 2015. We also have a bunch of stuff in LVM and NFS. We can't see what they are, but we're not all that, but we are some of that. So we take up a large percentage. We provide data services to a large percentage of OpenStack implementations. And there's some good reasons. I'm going to touch on a few of those in our time together today. Look, we like Ceph. We meet with customers and they say to us, oh, look, we're going to go Ceph, we're not going to go Ceph. My experiences are that some people love it, some people hate it. The message I get often is that when you set it up, and if you can set it up correctly and it runs, it's great. The story about why people might want to choose a NetApp storage platform underneath an OpenStack service is all around reducing cost and increasing resiliency. At that point in time when you do move your critical application onto an OpenStack platform, you want to guarantee that that platform is going to meet the SLA requirements of the business and your customers, and that's often why we hear customers moving onto NetApp platforms underneath OpenStack. We've got a lot of customers. I want to touch on two locally. So Melbourne, University of Melbourne, we actually worked closely with Aptera with those guys. It was an interesting experience for us because we went in there going, infrastructure this, how many IOPS that, gigabytes per second, and there's just these blank faces looking back at us because these guys were developers who wanted to build out an OpenStack platform. So we grabbed Aptera and said, can you help us please? Because we think we've got the answer, we just don't know how to articulate to the customer the value we can add. So we worked together with Aptera. They now run a large OpenStack implementation with a lot of different NetApp storage arrays underneath that, providing different services. And the other one is NetApp itself. We've now got 40,000 instances running on OpenStack for our own development of our own code. And it's made a big change in how NetApp's gone to market. We now release faster cadence of our product, and the quality of our ONTAP operating system is far higher than it used to be. We get far more issues. We hit bugs early in the testing phase. When it gets out to our customers, they have a far better experience. So there is a number of reasons why we have adopted ourselves an OpenStack environment for our own development of NetApp code. And we thought of a lot of things. I want to run through these major themes around the vision, solutions, ecosystem, and economics, just to cover them off briefly today. But we've got this vision around a next generation data center. It does sound a bit like a bunch of vendor bullshit, to be honest. But and we do talk about a lot of buzzwords. But we do think that we have a strategy that aligns very closely with what OpenStack's premise is of having this open ecosystem and common set of APIs. And we'll talk about how that fits into our vision. And our vision is a data fabric, and we'll talk a lot about data fabric. NetApp will often have a conversation about how fast this storage meter is and how fast that storage meter is, and we can have that conversation. The far more interesting thing is about how can we actually meet the requirements of business agility? How can we help these customers that are asking us to innovate faster or help them innovate faster? How can we actually achieve that? And that's what we do with our data fabric vision. And OpenStack fits perfectly into that. This is all about data mobility. In reality, about 3 years ago, I think, we had Dave Hitz, who wrote ONTAP 25 years ago, one of the founders of our company. He stood on stage in front of the entire sales force at kickoff and said, I want to make it as easy as possible for our customers to move off of our platforms. Not very popular with a bunch of sales guys who just got their goals for the year. But the reality is he was talking about the fact that we live in an open ecosystem. NetApp has no intention to build any clouds itself. We want to build the best technology with the best APIs to fit into those frameworks, and OpenStack provides that. There are a number of other integrations we have, and we'll discuss some of those, but our main premise is that we want to glue together applications in a hybrid cloud environment. We strongly feel that hybrid clouds are the new operating system for most businesses, and they need to have flexibility to move applications that are born in the cloud into other clouds, whether they be private or otherwise, and then back out again. Application lifecycle is going to be a real thing, and we need to enable our customers to be able to do that. Getting a credit card out and firing up an EC2 instance, for example, is really, really simple. How do I get my data there? And more importantly, if you've looked at those hyperscaler cost models, how do you get your data out again? We've got a number of surveys in the market today that say that the majority, it's a slim majority, but I'll reference an IDC survey recently that said 51% of customers who had moved workload into an Amazon cloud have moved them out again, or moved some of them out again in the last 12 months. So the idea of application mobility is real. Amazon wouldn't talk to me for years. Now they want to have a conversation. They now know that it's not easy. No one cloud is going to capture everything. OpenStack's premise is the fact that you have a common set of APIs that you can then run your infrastructure automation over the top of, and you can move your applications between these cloud environments. NetApp provides the data services to do that. It may be heresy to put an AWS thing on the wall, but this is what we can do. And I've heard more today about how OpenStack is moving to align these services between OpenStack and AWS together. And that's what NetApp can already do. Because we can talk to both of these API types, we can actually enable customers to run workloads in AWS and move them seamlessly into OpenStack environments and vice versa. It's a pretty compelling conversation. And OpenStack's doing more around this, and NetApp is continuing to do more around this, including things like shift hypervisors. So we've got a capability to clone a hypervisor, change it into a VM hypervisor from a Hyper-V hypervisor or vice versa, and then run that in different clouds. There's an awful lot of technology that is underneath the layers of how you are building and running applications today. So the solution stuff. There's an awful lot of workloads, and I think that one of the key things around OpenStack is really turning these things into genuine services. Interestingly, the requirements of these change, and this whole point around application mobility and lifecycle is that some of these may be quite comfortably running on a Ceph environment during early stages, but then as they productionize, as you mature the process around them, you might want to move them into NetApp-based storage services. This idea of mobility underneath these discrete services based on a bunch of things that are important to you, and that may be cost or risk or availability. This slide normally builds, but as soon as we run Adobe, I can't build it out, but obviously we've got a bunch of services. So whether it's compute, glance with the images, shared file services with vanilla, NetApp has a range of storage platforms that can support a range of the data services provided by OpenStack. I'm going to touch on a few of these on the next slide, but what I do want to talk about is AutoVault. AutoVault is our ability to provide complete replacement for tape. So, my conversation is often, and I drove that tape van, right? I know that conversation is around the fact that nobody likes tape. Wouldn't it be great to point that to an appliance? That appliance can then shift your backup images in any object-based cloud, including Swift. So it provides that capability to remove tape within the OpenStack environment and manage those importantly backups, but probably more importantly restores. I've always had a saying that a backup policy is great, but the restore policy is far more important. So if you've got your backups living in object storage on disk forever in cloud, you don't have to worry about recycling through LTO5, LTO6, LTO7 tapes, and APA and PRC certifications are getting tougher and tougher around that stuff. And here's the platforms. You have to give me a platform slide. I do sell storage. So Data ONTAP is our core operating system. This is a scale up, scale out. There is no concept of a outage at all. Once you do a migration to a Data ONTAP platform, it's the last migration, last outage planned or otherwise you'll ever have to do. Increasingly, we're selling those systems with all flash. As of this quarter, we've just finished our financial year. I would estimate 1 in 4 platforms that we're selling are now all flash. The important thing here is that we've got deep application integration, but that includes OpenStack, and we'll talk about some of the developer tool sets that we're also building integration points in with. Solidfire is our new acquisition. So Solidfire is the Dave Wright platform. It's all about scale out, it's all about granular scale out, it's all about very simple management. If your customer demands from you that you want a volume with 2,000 IOPS, you just build a volume with 2,000 IOPS using one line in a Cinder driver, and you tell it how many IOPS you want that to have, and it guarantees that's the minimum amount of IOPS that volume will be served. We can then transfer that into the VIC elements inside VMware. So what happens is inside of VMware, where you may have a volume, and that volume has a performance, as you move those volumes around, we keep that volume guarantee with the storage volume we created on Solidfire. Very easy to manage and very easy to scale. It scales in 1 RU building blocks. It really is built for cloud infrastructure. The E-Series and EF, all about sheer performance. When you want absolutely guaranteed performance for block storage, and we're talking below milliseconds, 400 microseconds, that's the platform to choose. And then Storage Grid Web Scale, which we'll touch on, is our object store. And that can be underneath a Swift implementation. We've got a number of ways of solving that problem. It really does depend on whether you're looking for the rich global namespace policy-driven data management. Storage Grid Web Scale was built for the health industry in the US. It's designed for 120-year plus file policy management, the whole cradle to grave thinking. It's a pretty powerful platform. And an example of how the things work, and Jeff and I had a brief conversation before we presented, and he spoke a lot about some of the benefits, but the storage efficiency thing is real. So because we do deduplication, inline, compression, we're about to bring out a term called compaction, we're driving efficiencies down. Using NetApp storage often saves you an awful lot of money. I think 80 to 90% deduplication rates in the case of Bank West. That's common when you're looking at running glance images, for example. And this is all offloaded. So we're running these images, we're cloning them up using zero-copy clones instantaneously and mounting up to server images. This is integrated with the Cinder driver as well. So there's some great integration points about how this stuff works and makes storage really easy. We don't want anybody to have to worry about storage anymore. We want you to be able to drive your storage requirements from the APIs or the tools you're using. All RESTful API support across all of our platforms. When I was doing this slide on Monday afternoon, my Twitter feed lit up with all the Game of Thrones announcements, so I might have got a little carried away with Hodor, if you've watched the latest episode, Willis. But this is a number of, just touching again on the implementations underneath Swift. So we can do Swift with WebScale, which we spoke about. This is our global namespace object storage solution. But we can also do it on E-Series. And just because you're buying a what I would call a lean, mean storage array, hasn't got that rich application integration, we can still reduce the cost significantly because of the way we handle RAID in this case. When you've got a large SATA drive and you've got to do a RAID rebuild on a white box piece of hardware, that could take days or weeks. We do shingling RAID, getting a bit nerdy, we can discuss it offline, but basically what it means is that within hours I can rebuild 8 terabyte SATA drives. So I don't need to keep as many copies. If I don't need to keep as many copies, I can greatly reduce the cost of storage underneath an object store, even just using E-Series straight underneath the Swift service. And developers. We've recently announced our new set of toolkits. We've got Java SDK toolkits. For the Solidfire stuff, we've just released our Python SDK toolkits. We now have, for NetApp, native Docker plugins. You can just call storage services directly from Docker. We work a lot with Mesos and Kubernetes. There's a rich ecosystem of development tools. We've got Jenkins workflows. We integrate with GitHub. In the same way you're taking snapshots of clones of your images, you can take snapshots and clones of your data repositories. We're working with companies now that their challenge was that the code base has moved on, the development streams moved on, they hit a bug, the customer's running that version of code, how do I restore that code base back? Instantaneous snapshots, mount the volume up, we can use Jenkins to automate it, we can attach that to a server, we can, in the testing environment, get that image, that build the customer's using back up again in minutes, not days or weeks that some customers currently work with. So those same instantaneous thin snapshots, those zero-copy clones, the data efficiencies can even apply equally to the developer world. Ecosystem stuff. We've got reference architectures with all the distro guys. I had a giggle at some of the comments from Gartner about Science Project. I had a giggle at some of the stuff from VMware about this being really difficult. My good friend Peter Lees at SUSE Linux will have some very different arguments about how easy it is to deploy the OpenStack distro, and they are working very, very much harder on that UI interface experience. Full integration with Puppet, Fuel, and Chef natively into the storage layer. You don't have to go and learn how to provision a volume and set its QoS using storage commands. You can do that directly from the application layer that you're familiar with, and we can provide it in a box. So this is a converged infrastructure, latest one out with Red Hat. You buy one of these, you determine how much compute, how much storage, how much network you want, and you've got an OpenStack platform ready to fire up as a private cloud instance. I'll let you do some reading. It's quite a long slide. Reading. Economics. Choose all three. You often get this thing about, what's cost, price, complexity, simplicity. NetApp strongly believes that, we've built a business for 25 years. We are, with the acquisition of EMC by Dell, the largest independent storage vendor on the planet. We've got an awful lot of customers. For a developer perspective, that's good. If you're developing on ONTAP and you can go and buy a copy of NetApp today from the Amazon Marketplace running on Amazon hardware, that's how innovative we are in making our operating systems available in this world of data fabrics. Move them around as you want to. Meeting those SLAs is the key thing. we have been doing this for a long time, so we can save you cost, but we're also can give you 6, 7, 8, 9s. Do you want synchronous replication? We can provide all of those rich data services underneath the covers, depending on your application requirements. And give it a go. We'll spot use some of the costs. If you visit this website, if you come downstairs and see us on the booth, we're quite happy to talk to you about this and run through this, but we can pay for some OpenStack cloud deployments on AWS, so you can run an OpenStack ready ONTAP version that I spoke about in AWS and give these data services a try for yourselves and see if the efficiencies that we've spoken about actually stack up. And please visit our GitHub site, so netapp.github.io. There is a full stack of code there in terms of OpenStack, but also our Docker code is all there as well. So we've got projects like CodeEasy, which fully automate the provisioning of Flex clones in the OpenStack environment. You can log on to that, access our own community. I think the Mitaka code is all there, and all the development documents from a NetApp perspective are already up. So you can see what our capabilities are. There's a bunch of videos and other good stuff. And with that, I think I'm on time. Thank you. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, you can ask me now, ask me afterwards. I've got a team of people that know far more than I do downstairs in our booth. You can come and talk to them as well. Yes?
Sure to show my ignorance, but if I allocate storage using this and give it to some domain, can I say to another domain that storage is over there and get both of them to share it?
Yes. Short answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to work for the details, but the short answer is yes.
Good.
All right. With that, I will not hold you back from your Wagyu steaks. It was Wagyu steaks? No, Wagyu steaks are off. Sorry. Cheers.